Okay. So greetings, my name is Eric Chen, and as chair of APA Division 49's Diversity Committee, I would like to welcome you all to this diversity presentation. For those of you who just joined us for the first time, and this is our fifth presentation this year, and this presentation is being recorded. The recording and the presentation slides will be made available later through Division 49's YouTube channel, where you could also find our previous diversity presentation recording as well. After this presentation, we will have one more presentation next month, and I hope you could join us then. I'm sending you now the link to our diversity Division 49's diversity resources in the chat box. So bear with me for a second. The link. And after you click the link, you can find more detailed information about all previous diversity presentations, as well as our Division 49's YouTube channel. And now I would like to say a few words to introduce our presenters. Dr. Noelle Lefforge is a faculty member in the clinical psychology program at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where she also served as the assistant director of clinical services and research of the program's training clinic. As a licensed psychologist, she has extensive expertise in group psychotherapy, community mental health prevention and intervention, suicidology, cultural diversity supervision and training. Professionally, Dr. Lefforge served as the Nevada representative for APA Council, is the past president of the Nevada Psychological Association, a board member for APA Division 49 and the AGPA. Dr. Claudia Mejia is a licensed psychologist and the director of social and behavioral health services and volunteers in medicine of Southern Nevada, a nonprofit free country for the uninsured. She has expertise in providing psychological services for Spanish-speaking populations, as well as supervision of behavioral health treatment in community mental health settings. Professionally, Dr. Mejia serves as secretary for the Southern Regional Board of the Nevada Psychological Association and is a board member for an emerging local nonprofit mental health agency. Without further ado, let's welcome Noelle and Claudia.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see everyone today. And we have a lot to present in a limited amount of time, so we're going to jump right into this.
Yes, thank you all. So today's presentation, and hopefully everything is showing correctly and we can make this available to you all after. Our presentation today is going to be based off a training model that Noelle, Stephanie McLaughlin, Melissa Goetz-Jones, and myself created. It's been such a long year. I'm trying to remember if it was this year that it was published or last year, but I think it was this year. And so I definitely want to refer you all to this article as it contains in a lot more detail some of the things that we'll be presenting today. As Noelle mentioned, we have a lot to go through. We have a very wonderful video presentation that I think will foster a lot of questions and create a discussion. And so the background information I'm going to run through briefly. So our main points today are going to be to review the literature establishing the harmfulness and not responding to microaggressions, discuss some of the barriers present for training psychotherapists in responding to these, and then present the training model. Again, the emphasis is going to be on the third point, but if anybody has any questions or needs further resources, please drop that into the chat and we'll be able to connect with you afterwards. So very briefly, I won't go through all these terms, but I do want to speak to what needs to be known for microaggressions to be more fully understood. So while we'll focus on microaggressions today based on particularly race, there are microaggressions based on any salient identity that one will have. And oftentimes these microaggressions are, as a kind of common expression, a expression of prejudice or implicit bias that one may not be consciously aware of. And therefore it's important to start to do kind of your own personal work to bring these to the forefront. For microaggression specifically, again, there's a lot of literature out there, and I encourage you all to read up on that if you haven't already. But a kind of main understood definition is that microaggressions are subtle forms of discrimination, often intentional, potentially unconscious, that send negative and denigrating messages to the recipients. An important part to know is that the microaggressions doesn't refer to the impact, rather it refers to the kind of private nature that they often occur in. So typically it's one-on-one or small groups that provides the microaggressor a sense of anonymity or potential denial. With microaggressions, there are a continuum of them. So when you think about old-fashioned racism, those would be termed more microassaults, and then they go all the way through to microinvalidations, which are more in line with aversive racism, implicit biases, kind of attacking the individual based on their identities that may not be something that can be as directly identified. For intersectional microaggressions, so one important part is to understand that each of us holds multiple identities, and based on the salience that we put on each of those, we may interpret a microaggression differently than someone else. So this is based in intersectional theory from Kimberly Crenshaw, which was introduced in 1989. And basically it speaks to the overlapping systems of oppression and discrimination. With her, it was based on, for women of color, understanding that the discrimination isn't solely based on gender or race, but rather the intersection of those two. And I really like this definition because it speaks to how you can't separate identities, right? And so if you define yourself one way, you risk losing all other parts of yourself. So we're really looking at that intersection of all of those identities. So with intersectional microaggressions, we want to pay attention to and understand that for myself, if I identify as a heterosexual Latina female, a microaggression, I may, depending on which identity status I place potentially more value on, I may interpret a microaggression more in terms of race or ethnicity or gender. So it's not as simple as saying this is attacking this identity, right? It's important to understand that each individual will interpret something based on how their identification status is and which identities they potentially place more weight on. And that may change depending on the setting. Some brief themes to this can include things like disapproval of LGBTQ identity based on different racial or ethnic or religious groups, assumption of inferior status for women of color, or assumption of criminalization of men of color, right? And there's many others in there. Okay, here's where I do want to spend a little bit more time on an emphasis, is there is a growing body of research that demonstrates the harmfulness of microaggressions, not only in the initial encounter, right? So initial reactions can be things like shock, not understanding that what just happened, potential denial of the situation, or potential reliving the event over and over, right? Kind of replaying it in your head and thinking about, did this happen? Questioning the reality of it, questioning oneself on how they responded. So I think that initial reaction part is commonly known for people, but there's growing body of literature that demonstrates that cumulative and prolonged exposure creates such hazards for the individual, right? So thinking about physiological symptoms, right? So there's growing literature that demonstrates high blood pressure, rapid increase of heart rate, tension headaches, physical pain, fatigue, ulcers, and that kind of continues to grow. And so it's important to pay attention to the traumatic psychological nature of prolonged exposure and cumulative, right? So there's that saying of death by 1,000 paper cuts. So it's kind of that same idea of, while one moment may not be or feel harmful, the cumulative nature of it weighs on somebody and can have detrimental effects, not just psychologically, but physically as well. The term I want to pay attention to also is racial battle fatigue. There is growing literature that describes this notion of what results from this constant physiological, psychological, just cultural having to cope with this throughout one's lifetime in an environment that is now deemed hostile or unsupportive, right? When you think about safety, and if you're constantly exposed to certain attacks in this nature, but there's no one there to respond or to help, it's likely that you'll deem that environment unsafe, right? And then again, that kind of builds up on your reaction to it. Racial battle fatigue can mirror PTSD. So think about symptoms such as like anger, anxiety, hopelessness, helplessness, physical avoidance of certain settings. Again, if you're deeming a situation as unsafe, you're going to want to avoid that. And then there's also kind of the resistance that comes from that, and being verbally or non-verbally kind of more aggressive or wanting to fight back, again, for safety reasons. And it's important to understand that all of this influences the individual, like I mentioned, not just physiologically, but psychologically, thinking about their self-image, thinking about difficulty being able to communicate or articulate their experience, being hypervigilant, experiencing frustration, and so on. So for us as clinicians, when we think about how we address this, there's typically seen that there's a lot of avoidance that happens, right, for various reasons. And this creates ruptures in therapy. So when this happens, clients feel uncomfortable, powerless, invalidated if the clinician who's seen kind of as this authority is not responding. One study showed that 53% experienced a microaggression from their therapist directly, which negatively impacts the working alliance. And again, this doesn't mean that it's an intentional or conscious experience from the part of the clinician, but the not addressing it is what impacts the working alliance. And 76% reported that the microaggression was not discussed, which again leads to that lower working alliance, potential early dropout of treatment, and not meeting their intended goals. So all of this, I think, is to say, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we must realize that developing that strong multicultural orientation requires that personal work. It's a lifelong process where we have to be willing to examine our biases, our attitudes, our beliefs, to improve upon how we understand this, how we address this, which we'll speak to in a second. When we think about group therapy, you add another layer to that, right? So these are just some of the questions that can be going on in the facilitator's mind while they also try to attend to the group needs, right? So things like, how much do I pay attention to this, right? Do I need to attend to the perpetrator, to the victim, to the witnesses, to my co-facilitator, and will the response be sufficient? Right? So these are just some of the questions that we need to keep in mind, and that are also likely influenced by the microaggression itself. So as I mentioned, that spectrum, so how maybe overt it is, those are all things to continue to keep in mind. So when we think about training, right, because that's another important part of like how do we address these things is through training, but there's a lot of barriers present when that happens. So this kind of topic tends to, or can elicit negative emotional response by everyone, by trainees. There's things like anger, maybe some guilt, shame, anxiety, and what will this look like? How will I address this? And those emotions can create disengagement, which is the opposite of what you want in a training experience. There may also be experience of, again, denial, not understanding or fully comprehending what the situation is, confusion, maybe also a desire to act, but not knowing how. And being left with this kind of self-doubt and shame, right? Because you're holding on to this desire to act, but not knowing exactly how to do it, or being fearful of being shamed in the moment for attempting. So you're left with this double bind, right? So like I mentioned with the therapists or the clinicians, same thing happens in this type of setting, right? We want to address these microaggressions. We want to train in terms of how to deal with them, but you also want to make sure people are able to engage appropriately and bring their full selves to it. So when we thought about all of these considerations to really create a responsive way to and safe way to train in this area, these are some of the things we really considered. So something that really promotes engagement, that brings people in to the conversation, right? We want to mitigate defensiveness. So how can we set this up in a way that individuals can be free to express themselves in a way that doesn't leave them feeling defensive and also reduces the shame while they're trying to engage in this training. And the biggest piece of it is just the practice of calling in versus calling out. So that notion of wanting to create discussion, fruitful discussion, wanting to try things, wanting to understand where the individuals are coming from. And so Noelle's going to speak a little bit more to our specific training model.
Yes, absolutely. So what we're focusing on today is really about the training model, not necessarily exactly what you need to do to respond to microaggressions. We have some general guidance on what to do and, obviously what not to do. We definitely promote responding to and not ignoring microaggressions. But I think we want to acknowledge that whenever a microaggression occurs, there's usually an infinite amount of context and variables at play that would influence how one should respond. I think that we're also residing in an ever-changing socio-political context that influences how we would respond. So we really see this as an area of lifelong learning that necessitates practice. And so we're going to go ahead and show you our training model. So everything you see may not be exactly what we're saying you should or shouldn't do, but it will show you how we do a training setup so that people can work through different responses and hopefully improve their skills. You're going to see at the beginning how we would introduce the training exercise, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into the training scenarios. And so our training model consists of assigning folks in an experiential group to various assigned roles and planting microaggressions to occur. The video will really be self-explanatory in how that unfolds. The one thing I want to add here, in addition to those that participate in the experiential group, the training model is also set up to have observers outside of the group who are also learners and engaged in the activity. We don't have time today to pause the video and unpack that, but we consider you all to be observers. And if it would be helpful to participate in the chat by asking questions or making observations, we will have a little bit of time at the end to address some of that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the training model. All right. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today to learn some ways to be better at responding to microaggressions as they unfold in group as the group leader. So today we're going to be engaged in a training model that hopefully will allow for a lot of exploration and growth and trying different things together to expand our own skill set for approaching microaggressions. So there's just a few guidelines and kind of orienting pieces that I want to go over. Myself and Claudia want to go over with you all before we get started. So one of the key things that we want to remind everyone about, we're going to be doing an experiential learning type group. We're going to have it unfold and you're going to be kind of playing yourself, but also potentially playing someone other than yourself as we try different things. And, as you bring your personal content, which would be fine, well, we want you to also remain fully engaged with your learning self. This is not the demo group or the role play group to bring your most vulnerable emotional self. We will be handling microaggressions, which can certainly be damaging, are certainly damaging. And so this is not the space to unpack all of your armor and subject yourself to potential harm here.
So we're all going to remain engaged in our learning selves throughout the duration of this exercise. One of the main obstacles to, I think, growing in our ability to handle microaggressions is all the shame that can come up around facilitating a group in which a microaggression is occurring. Of course, all of us want to get this right. None of us want to look like we're doing a poor job at handling this. We want to look competent in these areas, and yet they're so difficult. There's so many factors to track as a microaggression is unfolding. There's so many responses that one could engage in. There's often a lot of reasons that it's easy to avoid responding at all. And so to minimize that, we really want to engage in a training model where we're able to slow things down, where we're able to play with different responses, where we're able to maybe do things that we wouldn't normally do to learn from them and see how they play out. And so sometimes this means that you're going to be doing something that's not your real self, especially, one of you in each of the scenarios is going to be a microaggressor and actually commit a microaggression knowingly. Like, this is not something you would probably do naturally. And so I just want to plant that seed and remind us all to attempt to withhold judgment of ourselves and one another as we go through that exercise, realizing that people may be saying or doing things that are not representative of their true selves. Claudia, is there anything you want to add to that part of the explanation?
No, just I think the importance of the whole purpose of this is that slowdown and is the opportunity to talk through things that we might not normally have the space or opportunity for in kind of the real life group. So definitely take advantage of, I think Noelle will explain in a second, the timeout. So just take advantage of this space and having each other to talk through things, to slow it down and to really think through some of those difficult possible stuck moments that we may have when we're facilitating groups.
Yeah, so the timeout is one of the core features of the training model that we're using today. And so by timeout, what we mean is at any point, anyone involved in this exercise can say timeout. You can go ahead, you can signal it, you can say it, and that'll stop everything immediately. And what that creates is time and space for us to unpack what's going on. It creates an opportunity in which we can rewind, that we can go back and maybe do something differently to see how we end up in a different place. It's a time that, you can ask for assistance. You can say, I'm really stuck. I don't know what to do here. And we can kind of use the group wisdom to potentially generate some ideas about what we could do or what we wouldn't want to do. And there's probably other reasons that timeout might be helpful. For the first scenario, I'm going to be acting as the trainer observer, and will absolutely be using the timeout. And I think that this will work really well if each of you feels empowered to use the timeout. I can almost guarantee that the entire group will benefit if any one of you feels the need for a timeout and goes ahead and uses it. So we're very serious when we say each of you is empowered to call a timeout at any point in time.
What happens after I do the microaggression?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, when we get into the exercise part, we're going to start off as though we're all in group together. We'll probably just start with some checking in, how are you doing, to kind of get the ball rolling for some content. And then, we have a microaggression scenario that we've set up. At some point, Davi, you as the microaggressor will go ahead and enact that microaggression. And then we'll just see how the group might respond, how the target of the microaggression might respond, how other group members might respond, how the leader might respond. As much as we can, we kind of want to create an organic situation So, you know, keep in mind what you do know about how groups run and how you might personally react or not react, as well as what you've seen other people do. And we're going to try to play out different scenarios. Again, we'll use the timeout possibly to go back and try some different things.
And just want to emphasize too, I know I struggle with this sometimes in this kind of examples, is acting the group member role and not what we've been trained to do. And so your group member self might not respond as your facilitator self if you have that experience already. So just kind of want to emphasize that piece as well.
I have a quick question. Am I reading right? Am I the only group leader for this first part?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's true. And
Okay.
in part, that's meant to model some of the developmental considerations that are inherent in the training model. We've all been thoughtful in assigning roles. We don't want to assign roles to people who are uncomfortable playing those roles. And so, you know, each of you were contacted before this moment to ask what you were comfortable doing in the role play. And I think probably one of the most intimidating, I think the two most intimidating roles to play are the trainee group leader, right? Because you're coming into this without any of the experience or preparation, and to be put in the position of leading this group is a pretty daunting task. And so it makes sense that we kind of want to play this out with, you know, we as the authors of this paper, Stephanie, Claudia, myself, you know, taking those roles on. And then I think the other one that's probably, is they're challenging in different ways. I think being the microaggressor is a pretty challenging role because, you know, you have to unfortunately do something that could enact harm. And then of course, being the target of the microaggression is a pretty vulnerable position to be in. And so for this, you know, you'll notice that the authors of this paper are taking on most of those roles, and then Davi, you've agreed that that you would be not just comfortable, but wanted to do the microaggressor role, which we really appreciate, and I think a lot can be learned from.
I guess I don't know. I've had a really rough week. I'm glad I made it, but it was tough to make it here today. So yeah, it's been a tough week.
I'm glad you made it too.
Yeah, I feel the same. I've just been feeling really alone, scared about the future. Just, I don't know what's gonna happen.
I don't think pandemic is crazy, but I feel like I've been doing, you know, some of the stuff we talked about in our last session, and that kind of helped me. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Michelle. I'm feeling pretty okay this week.
It's been awful. I'm with Jessica. I'm really scared for the future. I just lost my job serving, you know, and that was really keeping me up afloat. But because of this stupid pandemic, now I don't have work. It's been awful, and I don't even know what's coming next. So just really, really, really upset right now.
That sounds hard, but I'm sure you'll find something soon. Like just start getting applications out there, maybe.
Yeah, you know, I don't think you would understand. Everyone knows that with affirmative action and all, you know, you're totally fine. But I'm in a different boat here.
What is that supposed to mean?
You know, just affirmative action. You know, you're likely to find a job a lot easier than I would right now.
That doesn't seem like something you should say.
Let me jump in. Claudia, I just noticed that maybe your eyes were looking around a little bit and you maybe looked a little bit confused. Am I picking up on the emotion that came up for you there? Was that am I understanding it right?
Yeah, I don't know why nobody else is seeing this. Like what he just said, that's pretty offensive.
Okay. You were confused about why you had confusion about why nobody else was seeing what you saw?
Yeah, why is nobody talking about it?
I mean, I saw it. I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess I don't know.
What's affirmative action?
See, this is what I deal with.
Yeah, Claudia, I was wondering what you might have been feeling when she asked that question. Like who was going to pick up that question? Yeah. So
I'm out here.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So this is a great way to start this. And so I want to do a timeout here just to unpack a little bit about let's make explicit all the reactions in the room as the microaggression happened. So I'm interested in hearing kind of from each member of the group, like what that moment was like as you put yourself in the role of a participant of this group. So maybe Jessica, would you mind going first, and I'll move around.
Yeah, when that was first said, I was thinking, well, goodness, like how do we resolve this really quickly? How do we do this? How do we make this better? But then I was also thinking, he seemed like he had a really tough week, and maybe he can't control what he's saying right now. I don't want to make it worse by calling him out.
So that I could totally see that happening in a real group, both being worried about taking it up with the microaggressor, also kind of panicked and wanting to resolve it quickly. Stacy, Michelle is kind of the other bystanders to this. Anything come up that you want to add to what Jessica was saying?
I think I felt a lot of like what Jessica was doing and wanting to like acknowledge that it was uncomfortable, but as a group member, not really knowing what to do with it and kind of feeling stuck in the middle of it.
Yeah, I know. My comment was not the best, but I was figuring that, oftentimes in groups, people don't know when like a microaggression is happening and that can cause further injury. But when I said it, my heart dropped. And when I saw Dr. Mejia's reaction, I was just like, I started to panic and feel stressed, and I felt my heart race, and oh my gosh, I got so nervous.
Right. Well, Michelle, we know that you weren't playing yourself. I mean, let's talk about a good learning opportunity, because this absolutely happens in group where somebody may be sitting there with a very different understanding than some of the other folks in the group, and that causes some of the tension. And Stephanie, as a group leader, what happened for you as the microaggression from?
I think, yeah, my attention was going so many different places. It seemed like maybe Claudia needed to be held as the target, and I didn't want her to feel isolated and abandoned and, leave on some level. But then when Claudia brought the other group members in, it brought my awareness to, whoa, the whole group needs to be held at this point. And who knows, maybe this is one of the first conflicts that came up in the group, and the whole process needed to be held just from a conflict perspective. But yeah, I wanted to be with everyone at one time, and I felt myself being conflicted about where to go. And especially when Claudia turned it to the other group members and brought them in, I was like, whoa, maybe we need to contain this a little bit first. And yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, I want to get back into the exercise. What do you all think would be helpful? Do you want to keep going from where we left off? Do we want to go back and try something different?
I think it would be cool to see how we keep moving forward after such a division in the group happened.
Okay, yeah, so let's play through some of the division. So I think where we left off, I remember, Michelle, you had said, what is a microaggression anyway? Claudia, you were kind of exasperated of, this is exactly what I mean. Not everyone in this group understands what is happening in this moment between Davi and I. that fair? Anybody remember anything more about what unfolded? Okay, so let's pick it up there. Claudia, if you wouldn't mind kind of repeating where you had kind of left off with your exasperation. Time in.
See, this is exactly what I mean. Nobody gets it.
Maybe we can take a step back, and I'm wondering if everyone can label some of the feelings that they're noticing in the room right now.
I just think it's not fair that I'm out here being vulnerable with you all, and then now I feel like I'm being even more antagonized. Like I lost my job, and now you all are coming at me like this. Like, what is going on here?
So the feeling is antagonized, and maybe sort of ganged up on and kind of isolated. You're feeling kind of isolated right now.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we're talking about this. I feel like we should be talking about, you know, me losing my job.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Claudia is obviously angry, and like what you said didn't like hurt. I mean, that matters too.
Thank you, Stacy.
You were concerned about Claudia's hurt, Stacy.
Well, I mean, how can it not hurt? Like it didn't help anything. It's not gonna help. Like Claudia's just trying to help.
I was just trying to say that, like, clearly there's differences between us, you know, and because of that, like, she doesn't have to worry about the same things I do.
You know, let me ask, I think this is one of the first, I don't know if you guys feel it. In my body, I feel some conflict in the group coming up, and all the emotions that can come up with a conflict. And of course, part of the group is trying to understand, work through things like this here, so that it can transform to our daily lives too. Let me ask you guys, what does it feel like to have this conflict coming up in the group right now? How is the group feeling to everyone right now? Like, what's safety like right now? Are you guys feeling able to stay engaged in the group right now? Or is there concern for other members?
I just feel really tense. Like obviously I feel really bad for Claudia, but you know, Doggy's also really upset. I don't know which direction to go and like who to help here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's time out here again. So this time out, I'd like to use, let's talk a little bit about what the group leader is doing. I think what we like about what the group leader is doing, what are some of the risks of what the group leader is doing, and you know, as fellow group leaders, if anyone else has ideas for what you could or could be doing differently than the group leader.
I appreciate how Steve is trying to get us kind of to identify what we're feeling, but also in a way that connects us maybe a little more.
In a way, I felt like I was, I think I was trying to tone down the conflict a little bit because you know, probably because my own stuff, but that I didn't know if the group could handle it, especially since we're all meeting for the first time anyway. But I also was trying to buy myself some time. I was like, how am I going to work this out between Claudia and Davey? And so I was trying to kind of bring it back so we could all, I guess, have a little time to process, including myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm curious how the interventions that Stephanie was using was landing with marginalized identities.
Yeah.
Were marginalized identities in this group, were you feeling supported? Were you feeling dropped, or somewhere in between those things?
I think I would have liked it to continue going in kind of a support, or at least to get that first before we maybe went into it more. And so by like thinking Stacy, I was hoping other people would kind of maybe step up a little bit because it seemed like the attention turned away and toward Dovey, which I think happens often, right? It's like, well, let's tend to that person's feelings, but the other person's get dropped a little bit. So I think that's what Stacy, I feel like, was attempting to do.
One idea that I had as somebody who was sitting outside watching it, I found myself kind of wondering if it would be helpful to label what was going on. You know, I wasn't sure because it's like we were kind of talking about something. Some people in the room had some understanding that a microaggression occurred, even if they wouldn't use that word. But I don't know if everybody knew that this was an identity-based microaggression. And I don't know, but I don't know if it would be helpful to spend time labeling or explicitly bringing in identities, or if that would have taken away from what was transpiring among the group members. And potentially like establishing a little more cohesion than was there before doing that. I don't know.
How do you think that would, do you have an example of how that would sound? Not to put you on the spot, but maybe what that would look like?
Well, I guess I know, but part of me was
putting you on the spot.
Well, let's slow down what happened. Like, I just want to repeat back what Davi said and Claudia's reaction to it. Like, what about what he said were you reacting to, Claudia? And Davi, what about Claudia makes you think that she's like different than you? To really like label, like, what it is, are we talking about gender here? Are we talking about race? Are we talking about sexual, like, what are we even talking? Or is it about like that she's a professional and he's not? Like, I have no idea like what he's even basing the microaggression on. But then part of me is like, if we unpack that, then it gets potentially too into the realm of whether or not we're going to validate the microaggression, which I know is another trap. I don't know.
I think checking in though is important, right? Like, I think that's the part that maybe gets skipped sometimes is what is the reaction, not what we're seeing as the reaction, if that makes sense.
What might have been a helpful way to check in, Claudia? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I wonder if what you said of like, let's slow this down, let's see what just happened. Claudia, what are you feeling right now, or what just happened for you? And this way it's not, it's just pausing and verifying with the person from that person, what is their experience.
I was curious what Davy's thinking, or kind of what the interventions were like for you as the microaggressor and how things came across for you.
I liked your approach because it felt very neutral. Because when I was talking about like everyone's gaining up on me, it felt more of the group, but not the group leader. So that was nice.
It's this careful balance, right? Because we don't want to totally alienate the microaggressor. I mean, we talk about calling in versus calling out, but then how do you do that in a way that doesn't leave the target of the microaggression feeling unsupported, invalidated, and repeating all those dynamics?
Yeah, I feel like that's the hard part. And like this, like I'm thinking how it would like play out, and like as a leader, like you can't take away your own feelings in that. And so like, while I like understand what like Davi is saying of like, well, I wanted it to be neutral. Like also like my personal belief is like, you should focus more on the person who was the target. Like they're the one that was attacked in it. So it's like hard to stay neutral, but also like how much as a group leader do you intervene or protect, because that is a real like harm being done. Like, do you stay neutral, or should you spend more time on who was hurt by it?
All right, so before we move on, I want to just check in, Davi, as the microaggressor, how are you doing?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, on the table that I do not identify with that microaggression at all, and that's not my identity. And for anyone that heard it, I just want to say that I hope, I just want to know it wasn't any of my actual sentiments at all.
I'm glad that you took this opportunity to really separate that from who you are and how we know you. I think that that's an important step to take, because we don't want you carrying that at all as we move forward.
And just want to say, I'm okay with what just happened. I think that's another important part of it, is during this kind of interaction is just making sure that we're taking care of ourselves enough to know, you know, where, how much of this we can take on. And so I appreciate you saying that, and for, if you were wondering, I'm okay, so.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge the courage it takes to do this exercise at all, and the courage in particular it took to be the microaggressor, to be the target of the microaggression. And I hope you can feel some of my appreciation.
Oh my goodness, it's been such a really terrifying time. I'm looking at the news, I'm looking at social media, I'm seeing what I thought were friends posting about just this police brutality that's going on, and it's just terrifying. You know, it's clear that, you know, not all lives are being treated equally, not all lives matter, and especially when it comes to the hands of the police. And for me, it's just really terrifying, you know.
Man, I get, you know, it's been reminding me of times that, like, man, I hate the police. Like, I remember times when I was younger that I'd just be like hanging out, and like me and my friends were just like trying to have some drinks, and I don't know, they kept trying to like mess with us. And I mean, when I was like younger, like in my teen years, like I was really nervous that they'd get me in trouble with my parents, and then I wouldn't be able to like drive, or they'd take away my phone or something like that. So yeah, I get so tired of the police sometimes.
I don't think we're seeing eye to eye right now on what I was just talking about.
Oh, what were you saying?
I mean, like, there's clearly some differences here in how the police treat other people, and I'm not really sure if you're getting that.
I just want to slow down here for a second and see what's happening, right? I want to see maybe one of my other group members, Jessica or Michelle. What do you see unfolding right now?
I don't think she really understands the differences, you know, like there's a difference. There's like privilege when you're like, oh, what's going to happen, versus like, is my life on the line, you know? So I'm kind of uncomfy, you know.
And just to put words to that a little bit, like, what do you see? What difference is there?
Well, she's a white female, and you know, there's a lot of privilege. You know, I present as white, so I understand that I have privilege with being white, and you know, they're like, I don't have to live in fear of the police, and because I know that like there's just a discrimination in our country and all that kind of stuff. I can't articulate it well, but I just know that that's, you know, not cool. But I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one.
How are you feeling about that, Stephanie? I think some of the group members see this maybe being a difference of experience based on race.
Yeah, well, I feel like, I guess, confused and like sad, because I actually, like, I was trying to connect with Davi, and so like I feel like that part's being missed. Like, I've always really liked him and wanted to connect with him, and it feels like I failed.
There's some vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take a timeout right here. So I think I'm just curious about if anybody's seeing a possible other way that either the group leaders could have responded, or one of the group members may have brought in any other ideas on. If we were to rewind in a second, what are some thoughts of what just happened?
I guess as a group leader, I was trying to figure out how to jump in, and I wanted to check to see how Davi experienced that, and like if he experienced it as connection, or obviously didn't, but just not sure like how much to hold either side of that and when to do that.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, like, I was kind of playing with you know, trying to like what it would look like to kind of rapidly get involved with what was unfolding. And I wanted to play with the idea of bringing in another group member to put words to what was unfolding. But I was also, as I was doing it, I was a little bit worried about potentially putting them in a risky position. Because I, you know, especially calling specifically on Jessica and Michelle, and knowing something about their identities and having them like speak to the microaggression as a white woman, I'd be interested. I don't know. I wasn't sure that was the best way to go about doing that.
I'm wondering then if we can kind of rewind to right after it happened and Debbie kind of responded, and to kind of enact how Stacy, you maybe would have taken it in a different way. Okay, so let's rewind, and Debbie, if you can just kind of jump in with a little bit of your reaction.
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing eye to eye on this, Stephanie. I don't think you're getting it.
Debbie, I'm wondering what are you feeling right now?
I just feel misunderstood. Yeah, just misunderstood.
Well, you know, that wasn't my intent. That wasn't my intent to leave you feeling that way.
What was your intent, Stephanie?
I was just trying, I mean, I think in the moment, I was just trying to relate with him. And Davi's always someone that I've really liked and respected. And so I think I was trying to find an opportunity to connect with them. And then maybe also just respond to what he was saying, because other group members weren't responding. And so, yeah, I was just trying to connect with them more. Didn't go very well.
Well, how are you feeling now, Debbie? Hearing a little bit about Stephanie's intent.
I guess now, after hearing that, I get it. I understand that, and I appreciate that, Stephanie. You always had my back. I guess maybe it might be just me projecting my own fears of what's going on right now directly onto you, but yeah.
Can we time out? I'm not sure where to go from here. I feel stuck. Like it seems like it's good what's happening, but I don't know kind of where to go or what's needed.
I had the thought, like, I think I had a similar feeling, Stacy. I was like, something like, yeah, like they're kind of coming together some, but I felt like, but I wouldn't want to let me off the hook in a way. Like, I think there was still.
I wanted to step in, but I didn't want to keep like bagging on Stephanie. Like I want to be like, okay, but it's not about the intent here. It's about the impact, and clearly there's an impact here, and I don't want to just let that pass.
Yeah, I think I like wanted to make sure Davi felt supported, and also not wanting to put all the weight on him to explain what's going on. Like I didn't want to burden him with something after he was the one that was the target.
I know, like personally, like it felt like relieving after the interaction between me and Stephanie just right there. So like if the conversation moved on, I would have been fine. But like Jessica was saying, I don't know if it addresses the actual core of what just happened.
Yeah, and I know from, oh, sorry, Dr. Lefforge, were you going to say something?
No, you go.
From another group member's perspective, I was just like, it feels like he's taking on the burden of the microaggression and like being like, yeah, it's totally cool. I understand that that wasn't your intent. And I was like, that still feels icky.
Yeah, I wanted to find a way as a facilitator to like let Stephanie have some grace through this, but keeping the racial part of this salient, like not allowing it to be swept under the rug as, oh yeah, they were talking about the same thing when clearly they were not. But then also not wanting, I was worried about, I think what you're saying too is protecting Davi by not like amplifying a moment that could put him in a different sort of vulnerable position. So I didn't want to like roll over it, but I didn't also want to create more tension for Davi.
Maybe it'd be like opening it up to the group, like, does this feel resolved? Does anything here feels like there's left to be unpacked? And see if the group members bring it up. But if they don't, is it kind of the leader's responsibility at that point to set that tone of what the culture of the group is like, and that we're going to have conversations about this in here, or about microaggressions in here? I don't know.
So that gives you a pretty good idea of what this training model looks like. Normally we would have more of a chance to do the timeouts and actually bring all of you audience members into the discussion. I do really appreciate some of the comments, the thoughtful comments that occurred in the chat. So we just have about 5 minutes left. I know some of you probably already need to go, but Dr. Mejia and I are happy to take any questions. I also just wanted to give credit to the trainees you saw in the video. These are trainees that we work with, and we're brave enough to do this. And so you saw Jessica, Davi, Michelle, and Stacy, and their information's in the slides.
Hi, I'm Josephine. I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if I missed it being addressed during the video, but one of the trainees made the point about, like, how much do you protect the target versus stay neutral? I'm curious about that piece, because I think that's a dilemma I can see myself in. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we really wanted to show is, that this is training. And so having a lot of discussions around that balance, I think is key. I don't think we're going to arrive at like a simple answer to that question, but we certainly wouldn't want somebody leaving the training exercise thinking that they don't have a responsibility to protect the target. I think the message is, like, that should really come first. And we do a lot of protecting of the microaggressor just naturally, and we need to work against that. Dr. Mejia, did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, no, I think the purpose of this training model and why we think it's so valuable is so you can really work through some of those things, because it's also going to be dependent on the individual, right? And so checking in on how the target is responding, how they're feeling, I think that's the important part. Oftentimes in this type of work, there's a lot of assumptions that are kind of placed on people based on, our own stuff. And so this training model, I think, can help really slow things down so that you can kind of try some things out or figure out how to ask certain things. So I do want to, I know we have a little bit of time. There was a question in the chat on what is the professor's responsibility in an educational setting to address and mitigate damage done by a microaggression. Thank you very much for that question. I think it's important to really integrate some of the initial literature that we presented at the beginning of the impact of microaggressions and the cumulative nature of them, because I know in my training, the term was brought up and it was a very culturally responsive training program. There wasn't as much research at that time on the impact of it. And so I think there's a huge responsibility from the training perspective, whether it's supervision, supervisors, co-facilitators, or professors, to really integrate this literature into the students' understanding and into all of our understandings, and not just in a kind of workshop manner, right? But as a very integrated part of the curriculum. I don't know if you want to say anything else to that, Noelle.
Yeah, I would just say absolutely put a lot of thought into the preparation to do this and making sure that everybody's ready and educated, and in the debriefing and allowing opportunities to come back together to work through any loose ends. And I also want to balance the risks of this exercise with other considerations, right? If I have trainees, and I do have trainees who run groups all the time, and they are being subjected to microaggressions. And so having a safer way to really work through that and come together as a group and support working through those there's a lot of benefit, even though there is some risk to doing this training model.
So it's 12:59 now. So unfortunately, we won't have much time to the discussion. And I just want to say thank you to you, Noelle, Claudia, as well as your students for amount of time, energy you have put in to share with us your own your work, as well as producing this video training video is so helpful for us. I'm sure that would help us to have a lot of discussions in our training sessions in the future. So I want to thank you both, as well as your students, for sharing with us your own work today. And I'm sure that this is probably just the beginning of our own discussion in terms of how we could all work together to address microaggressions and training our own students, interns, so they could be more competent professionals in addressing the microaggressions in their own work in the future. As I share with you all in the chat, this recording is being recorded, and then when this is available, I would have it uploaded through thanks to Noelle's work. And we made this available through our Division 49's YouTube channel. You can have access to the whole recording as well as the slides as well. So I hope that you all could join us for the final presentation next month. And I want to say happy Thanksgiving to you all as well. So thank you, Noelle, Claudia, and all of you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.